Hello, you're listening to the opening statement with Joe Shannon. Who am I? I'm going on my 30th year of marriage to my lovely wife, Michelle. I'm a father of 6, a lawyer, a big fan of St. Joan of Arc Parish and School, University of Illinois, Marquette, University of Portland, University of Notre Dame, and an amateur coach. But I'm also a business owner and entrepreneur. On this podcast, I sit down with interesting people and business professionals across the nation who are making a big impact in their communities. I want to find out how they got started and what we can learn from them. I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts by leaving a review. We're joined today by Dan Iverson, the head cross-country coach at Naperville North High School. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing great, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sitting here overlooking a nice pond here in suburban Chicago, and I'm thinking back to all of the years that my girls ran cross-country and track for you at Naperville North, and how lucky we were to have that relationship. How are things going here in 2020 for Naperville North girls cross-country?
Well, 2020, we back in the fall in 19, we won our 4th straight state championship. So that's been good. So, now obviously we're in a bit of a weird position right now, looking forward to the fall of 2020 and then seeing if we even get a track season at all this spring. So a lot in limbo at the moment.
Yeah. So I don't know if I ever told you this, but I used to be a runner a long time ago. And in high school in 1980, I was a junior in high school, and Mount St. Helens blew up about 70 miles from where my house was. And so it was May 18th. And of 1980, it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and it got pitch black. So the world changed on that day because I don't think that the lower 48 had a volcano explosion in a really long time. So It was very interesting to see how we made it through our cross country, our track season then, and I see some parallels now with this whole thing with this coronavirus and stay at home type thing. How are you working with your runners right now with respect to them staying in shape while this is all going on?
Well, we're kind of tweaking it daily almost. But I will say before I go into that, I actually was out in Portland to watch Mount St. Helens erupt then as well. And I wasn't there for the first one, but I saw some of the subsequent eruptions as I went out to visit relatives in Portland. So that was a pretty incredible thing to see the ash and so I see what you mean by the parallels. I'm sure that was pretty surreal as well.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy. It was pitch black at 9 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of us were really struck because it was something completely unexpected, kind of like the way this virus has hit us. But one of the things that that came out of it was an unbelievable boon to the agricultural economy, because I guess this ash that came down, had a lot of really good things for the soil, and ended up, working out good for the farmers down the road. But boy, I tell you, on May 18th, 1980, I was a kind of an interesting moment for me to see how this. We used to train for the next couple of weeks. We used to run through the halls of our school. So we wouldn't go outside because people couldn't really go outside, without masks on, etc. But I digress from that. But I wanted to talk to you. In preparation for this interview, I did a little background on where you've come from, but maybe you could let our listeners know, some of your background in your own words, like where were you born, where'd you grow up, and how did you end up in Naperville?
Well, my family's actually from Minnesota, but I actually have never lived there. So both sides of the family are from there, and now I have branches of the family both in Minnesota and Oregon, but I've never lived either place. My parents moved when they were pregnant with me out east. So I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and then moved around the Northeast until they moved back to the Midwest, back to Illinois, or to Illinois, back to, and finally settled. My dad was a doctor, and set up a practice in Macomb, Illinois. So kind of a random set of circumstances that led us to a rural environment down by Western Illinois University in Macomb. And so I lived there. That's really my hometown. I mean, I lived, in spite of where my family is from, I lived from kindergarten until high school in Macomb. And so, and started running then, kind of bumped around sports, but ended up running by junior high and kind of was hooked. And that ended up driving a lot of my college decision. Actually, knew I wanted to teach history and political science, which is what I wanted to major in, but eventually found a home at North Central College in Naperville. So that's kind of where.
Let's back up a little bit here. Let's back
Sure.
up. So you're in high school and you're in Macomb.
Yep.
And so when you're there, what type of races were you running back then?
I was a distance runner, a pure distance runner. I mean, cross country was probably my favorite, but I was a miler and two. Well, actually, there were lots of meets where I would run all three of the longer events: the 800, the mile, and the 2 mile. Even at like a conference meet, it was a relatively small school in a relatively small conference, and so I could get away with that sort of thing then. But that was pretty common for me to run those sorts of events.
And what made you decide to go all the way, east to North Central College?
Well, I think like a lot of runners, I wanted to go Division I. I was a pretty good runner, not as good as I thought I was probably, but at the same time, well, definitely not as good as I thought I was. I mean, I was looking at Division I colleges and getting lukewarm receptions at best. And I was set to go to either Kansas State University or University of Minnesota. And then nothing worked out well for me in high school. I was I think what most people would have called me a pretty massive head case. I was a very good runner with the potential to qualify for state. We didn't have a team that could qualify for state, but I try. Every time we got to a sectional meet, the state qualifying meet, I ran my worst race of the year. I just could not put it together on the big days, and I'm pretty sure my coach was pretty frustrated with that. But it also precluded any sense that I could possibly go to a Division I college, because I never really made it to a state meet. And so my dad, who was, like I said, was a doctor, one of his partners, he and his wife had both gone to North Central College and had been, since I was in junior high, telling me, hey, we went to a school that has a great running program. You should check it out. And I had never heard of Naperville, nor had I heard of North Central College. And that didn't register as an option for me until I didn't qualify for state my senior year. And then I thought, you know what, I maybe need to think this through again, and visited North Central. And to call that moment transformative when meeting the coach at North Central would probably be an understatement. Certainly my decision to go there was a big part of who I am today.
So let's talk about that. So, we here in the Naperville area are certainly proud of North Central for a number of reasons. I happen to think that it's a great school, and it produces a lot of great teachers like yourself and educators. But as far as a cross country program. I don't really know any Division I, II, or III programs that equal what Al Carius has put together. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Al Carius and how it transformed this head case from Macomb into the type of guy you are now.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's it started the first time I met him. I mean, it didn't take more than 5 minutes into the conversation to know that North Central was where I needed to be as an athlete. And, because again, like I said, I'd come from a lot of disappointment, and North Central was definitely a fallback for me because of what I did just mentioned. But I sat down and there was this sense with Al that if you wanted to go to a place where you were going to be supported and loved and that you were going to have a chance to be the best you possibly could be, that North Central was the place to do that. And he made that clear. Not, it's one of those things where, what's the quote? People, may forget what you tell them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that was really true with Al. And it still is true with Al, that he just has this way of making you feel like, that you have a potential that's relatively unlimited, and that no matter who you are an incredibly important person. And that kind of became a foundational element of how I ended up trying to build a program at Naperville North. But it certainly was something that took some pressure off of me. I mean, I knew that I had a partner in this as a coach, and not that I didn't have a great guy as a high school coach. I mean, I did. My high school coach was a really great guy. But there was just something different about Al in a way that he was able to walk with me and to allow me to enjoy successes, but then to walk with me through, the failures along the way. Having that there was a huge weight off of my, that I couldn't shake in high school, but it took me about 3 years of college to finally figure it out.
Yeah. So I was looking through some of your background, and I know you're a pretty modest guy, but you ended up being an All-American in the steeplechase, didn't you?
That's true. Yes, I was an All-American my senior year.
That's great. And then you worked and you ran on some cross-country teams as well?
Right. I was in the top 7. I actually was in the top 7 for 2 national championships my junior and senior year. And then we won the national championship in my senior year of track as well, when I was an All-American. All of those are tremendous memories for me. To be a part of 3 national championships at North Central College was just amazing.
Yeah, when I talk to every now and then, I'll talk to athletes, high school athletes, and I don't know whether it's solicited or not, but when I talk to them, I talk to them about the different experiences that they can get, competing for a program. And your story is a great one because it really, as you know, we're going to be doing our jobs, our day jobs for the rest of our lives. You may compete for 4 years and maybe a little bit afterwards, but I always say go to the place that's going to help you prepare yourself for, the rest of your life as either an educator like you or administrator like you somewhat are now with being the head of the teachers union or that type of thing. So to me, that's kind of my thought with these folks. And I know you deal with these kids all the time. What type of advice would you give to maybe somebody listening that's a really good high school athlete with respect to selecting the type of college experience they want?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, the best advice I got that ultimately ended up, even getting me to consider North Central was, to try to conceive of what you think that the ideal place for yourself will be on a number of levels: size, academic possibilities, any extracurriculars that you're looking for, and then think about what you can do without. Because there's really, I mean, it's so difficult to pick you know, without experiencing it, to pick a place that is the perfect place for you. And so you ultimately have to decide, what are the things that you really want in a school can you be okay not having, and then begin to look that way. Because in North Central for me, I didn't look at any. North Central was the only college I looked at that was not a very large university. I mean, I really had thought I wanted that. And even in retrospect, I probably would have liked that, to have had a much larger university. But ultimately, it was something that I decided I could do without, and it made all the difference. Trying not to look for perfection is probably a good way to do that. I mean, there's a lot of good places out there, and the perfect one is just a hard one. It's a hard standard to to aspire to. And so again, what you can do without, I think, is probably the best advice. Certainly the best advice I got. It's the advice I give to a lot of kids over the last 26 years.
That's great. So if you could break it down, I know this is going to be this. There's so much stuff we can cover with you on your very, very interesting life. But what could you tell us about what you learned from Al Carius and that whole North Central program that helped you shape into the powerhouse high school program that you put together at Naperville North Girls Cross Country?
Well, I think what it boils down to the mission statement of Naperville North Cross Country, or I'm sorry, not Naperville North Cross Country, North Central College Cross Country, which is run for fun and personal bests. And that just sounds so simple. It sounds, like a ridiculous statement as a kind of a meaning for life sort of a thing. But at the same time, what I learned at North Central was that being your best was part of a process that you had to commit to, and it had to be a fulfilling process for you. I mean, run for fun and personal best it really covers. I don't think I've ever heard it put any better than that. I mean, I try to do it in my program without plagiarizing him, and I haven't been able to do any better than run for fun and personal best. I mean, the process has to be enjoyable. It has to be something that you truly enjoy doing on a regular basis, and it has to be something that is personal to everybody. That the slowest runner on the team can still get some significant benefit from it, because that person is also seeking a personal best. The fastest runner and the slowest runner on the team each have a reason to be there, and an equal reason to be there, because they're working for a process that is both fulfilling and will yield them the best that they're possible of best that they're capable of becoming. Too often, and I guess the distinction is, we define success by whether or not you win, and and winning is generally defined as obviously finishing first. And one of the things I think Run for Fun and Personal Best explains is that really winning is not necessarily part of the equation. And over time, and I've done research and read books, and now that there's actual research to back that up, that Boston University years ago did a fascinating study of perennially successful high school athletic programs. And they wanted to know, I mean, across all sports, want to know what characteristics makes a high school athletic program perennially successful. And what they found was that the commonality was that every perennially successful high school athletic program, every kid in the program, freshman through senior, could articulate pretty clearly why they were there. And it was the same throughout the program, and it was never about winning. That it was always about the fulfillment of their human potential. And when a program understands that, and when they're bought into that from top to bottom, freshman through senior, generally good things happen. And that was what I think that was the why I was such a head case in high school, because all I could think about was whether or not I was going to finish in a good enough place to qualify, or win a race, or beat this person or that person. And that's a hard thing to do, because of course mean, you can't control other people. You can't play defense in running. And so the only thing you really can do that matters at all is to control yourself. And ultimately, that idea that this is a matter of a process of bringing out the very best in me and being part of a culture then built on that, where everybody's trying to do that and everybody's helping each other do that. There's just no downside to that. And really, that's what I took from North Central and it made part of my life.
That's great. So when did you start being the cross country coach at Naperville North?
I started teaching at North in the fall of 1994, right after graduating. I was the head track coach right away, which is a bad idea to make a 23-year-old a head track coach. I did not realize that at the time, but that is not a good idea for someone just out of high school. I had a lot to learn. But I was assistant cross country that first fall and the second fall, so 1994, 95. But then in 96, the coach that I had assisted for took a different job, and I became the head coach for girls cross country at 96.
Okay, so let's go back to there. Okay, so it's 1996.
Yep.
It's 2020 now. I just want to give the listeners a little bit of a background on where we come from then. Your first state championship, number one win was in 2001, right?
We won in 2001, correct. Yep.
Okay, so then when I did the little background here, I see that you have been the head coach for 9 state cross-country championships in girls cross-country at the highest level in Naperville. Is that true?
That's true, yes. Yep.
And there's 10, there was a guy named Marty B that coached coached a team earlier back in the early 90s, but you've had 9, and I counted that since 2001, 14 of the last 19 years, your team has been on the podium, first, second, or third, and you guys, you've won 9, and there's been a bunch of seconds and thirds, but you've had 4 state championships in a row. Isn't that right?
That sounds all correct. Yep.
So let's go back to 1996. So if there's a cross country program, and the one thing I really do like about cross country is that it seems to me like a lot of the folks that are in it are sharing information and sharing. In fact, you have a website for your Naperville North girls cross country team that you post all of the stuff publicly. So it doesn't seem like you're a group that is exclusive on information and basically hoarding information. You kind of want other programs to rise as well. Yeah. So I really that's why I kind of like the whole running group. When I first moved to Naperville back in, I was recently married, and my wife and I moved to Naperville in 92, 93. I ended up joining a group that would run on Sunday mornings right by North Central, and I couldn't believe there was like about 80 people there on a Sunday morning and just running. I don't know if they're still doing that today, but back then they were.
Maybe not right this second, but yes.
Yeah, and so I met a bunch of people when I first moved here, and I really liked the vibe of Naperville at that point. I ended up sending my top 3 girls, my oldest 3 girls, Emma, Claire, and Kate, to Naperville North. That's how our paths crossed, Dan. Right. But one of the things that if there's a cross country coach that's starting a program back like you did in 1996, tell me how you went from 1996 to a state championship in 2001.
Well, the things, I heard a sermon at church one time that the 2 things you really need to make progress are memory and hope. And I think the context was a little bit different when the pastor was talking about it, but at the same time, it's always stuck with me in terms of what we're talking about here is building progress, and you have to have hope for something better than where you're at right now, and that hope has to be fueled by some degree of memory of that being present at some point in the past. And if one of the two are absent, then you have a real problem. And so what I had in 96 was a situation where Naperville North Cross Country was relatively new to the scene. I mean, it had never qualified out of regionals, which is the first step to state, regional, sectional, state. Never qualified out of regionals until 1990. And then in 1991, it got four freshmen and a junior, who were amazing. I mean, they went from never having qualified out of regionals to being ranked as the top team in the state. And this was when I was in Northside. I wasn't really conscious of this too much. But that group had placed in the top 5th and 6th at state or something like that in 91 and 92. But then in 93, they won. And that was my senior year at North Central. And when my first year of coaching was that group's, that Fab Four freshman group, as they were kind of called at the time, that was their senior year. So I got to know them and coach them as an assistant, basically, for the senior year. But when they left, that was a jarring thing for the program, because it's a program that didn't have a lot of history to it, and it was coming off of a state championship when those kids were juniors, and they were third as seniors in 94. And so, the memory was still fresh, and the hope was still there in 95 and in 96. But the danger was that we would, that we were, every year we were losing a group of people who'd remembered being on the podium at state. And then we were gaining people who'd never known that. And so, one of the big moments to me, as I was trying to struggle to sort of, and I didn't know I was struggling for this at the time, but trying to keep alive the hope from the memory of what we'd done in the past. One of the things that happened, one of the things we did right away is to institute a camping trip at the beginning of the year, where we would go away and work together on our common direction and that sort of a thing. But it wasn't until 1998 where finally we were around the campfire, and one of the captains asked me, this was a person who had not been part of any of those, or the state championship certainly, asked what I thought they could do. And normally I don't answer that question because I want it to come from the girls, but that year I did. And I said, you know what, I think you guys can earn a trophy. And I wasn't sure we could, but I thought maybe. and you could almost see them thinking about it for a little bit, and then the light bulb kind of went off, and they kind of said about it. And it was a kind of a cool moment around that campfire to see what that group accomplished, because that group ended up going undefeated through the regular season and did not lose until the state meet when we were second. And that's not a team that started the season particularly on fire to be, one of the top teams in the state. But somehow we were able to create that kind of memory and hope combination. And then we haven't lost it. I mean, it's one of the things that I've tried, I wanted to see every person that goes through Naperville North Cross Country to be able to be a chance to get their picture taken with a state trophy of some kind. And we've done that since 1998. Nobody has graduated Naperville North Cross Country without at least 1 year being a part of a team that has earned a championship or earned a trophy. And I think that's a big part of is setting an expectation that that once they look around and realize that the person who graduated a year ahead of them was able to work hard and to contribute to a state championship, the sense is that they can too. And I think that's a really powerful thing. This idea that that because of what the people have done, like your daughters, and the people who ran with them, inspired the people who came behind them, and who inspired the people that came behind them, and who are on the team now. And so we've got a whole lot of people who are inspired by the people that work their rear ends off to try to become a little bit better. And holy smokes, I mean, you get people who would have considered themselves relatively ordinarily talented people contributing to something really extra special when they really believe that, that combination of memory and hope are a real powerful combination together.
Now, the mental side of the memory and hope, I really like that. I really like that because, you talked about that you guys going away for a camping trip way back when. Has that continued up until now?
Yep. In fact, we almost have, I will tell people, because I occasionally I'll get in contact, via Facebook or some other way, or I'll just run into a alum. So, sometimes they've got kids now and that sort of a thing. But some of the traditions that we started in 1996 are still traditions today. And so it's changed, it's evolved some, obviously, but some of the games we play, some of the activities that we do, some of the food that we eat, is the stuff of lore that is 24 years old or so, whatever the camping trip is. So that's kind of a cool aspect of this, I think, is that the camping trip has become a real traditional part that athletes who are 14 years old and a freshman and a 40-year-old mother can talk about as part of the program.
Now let's move on to I typically have these go for a half hour, but would you mind if we went for another 15 minutes or so?
No, that's fine. I've got time.
Yeah, great. So one of the things that I remember as a runner, being a long time ago, is the mental aspect, which is a big part, obviously, because I do believe that you have to, in your mind, have a goal, and that you do, in your mind, have to have some sort of belief system where you can do it. But the other part of it is the physical aspect of it, which is obviously with running, it's probably one of the easiest to understand sports, is that they all start on one line and then they all run, and then whoever finishes first wins.
Right.
How do you what type, when you first started up until now, has your training techniques changed over the years?
Oh yes, yeah, very much. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, I'm far more well-versed scientifically than I was 25 years ago. And so I feel a little bit more confident with regard to being able to tailor training to where an athlete is and where they want to be. I think I think most young coaches train the way they ran. And that's kind of what I did for a while. And there wasn't it wasn't like I did a lot of really stupid stuff. It just, you learn and you realize that maybe there's better ways to do stuff. And so, and every year I change something a little bit as I read more and I learn more, and I pay very close attention to what's coming out, what people are talking about, what the latest research says, both psychologically and physiologically. And so we adapt, but yeah. So the camping trip is pretty similar to what it was back when, in 96, 97, 98. But my training is definitely, it's different. There are a few things probably are held over. Some of the basic underlying, idea that to get good you have to run a lot, which is still true. But how fast, how much, exactly what the workouts are, definitely have evolved.
Good. Yeah, I'll have to have you on a different time to talk about one thing that I've always been fascinated with, which is how to get your athletes in a position to have a peak performance at important meets. And we'll cover that later. But
Sure.
Some of the things I want to talk to you about, or outside of running, is if you could tell us, I know you told us one of the defining moments was when you sat down with Al Carius when you're looking for colleges. Are there any other defining moments? I know that you probably had 100 of them, and you will have 100 more as time goes on because you're a young man. But are there any defining moments that in your personal life that you'd like to share?
Well, let's see. I mean, there's a lot that, again, you've hit one really big one, as far as that goes. But I guess if you consider my evolution, one of the things that as I evolved for myself from, again, what I think people would call a head case, to someone who actually got pretty good at running well when the chips were down. I do remember warming up for nationals my senior year, and having this sort of feeling like, I don't know. I mean, it was a moment of clarity, I guess, where all I had wanted to do for my freshman year was be All-American, and I was down to my last shot. I mean, I was close. I was close in cross country. I was 34th, and they took the top 25. So I missed it by maybe 10, 12 seconds, something like that. So I was kind of close, but this was my last shot. And it was a time when in high school I would have been completely frozen up and freaked out about that. But the clarity that I felt warming up for that, I feel it like it was yesterday. I mean, it just occurred to me that I had dotted every I and crossed every T, and I would be okay. And part of that's probably faith at some level, taking control that way. But I knew I'd worked as hard as I possibly could work. I had done everything I could do, which I always had done anyway, but it was a consciousness of that. And I wasn't worried. And the lack of worry, the ability to go to the line not worried about where I was going to finish and just run. I ran so fast that day that I lost track of my splits because I was running. I had never heard splits that fast, and so I was disoriented. And so but that feeling, I mean, it was unbelievable how good that felt. And I ended up tripping and falling over the last hurdle. And so my time wasn't quite as good as what I was running prior to that. But I was able to get up and sneak out the last All-American spot that day. But I still share that with kids because that's really what I think a kid should aspire to, is that place where they're not worried. That they have something they really, 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 really work hard for, but that when a push comes to shove, when they get to a big meet, that they can just put it aside and just trust that they've done what they need to do and let happen what's going to happen. I mean, you can look at my falling that day and have it be, a defeat. I mean, I could have run maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds faster, but it was still a personal best for me. I was All-American. It was great. But even if I hadn't gotten All-American, I only held off the guy by 900ths of a second. I still, I think, would have felt pretty darn good about it because I had given everything I could have given. I just ran out of gas and hit the last hurdle.
That's awesome story. I love that story. Did you at the end of your career of doing that, that must have been something for your folks to see and just to see your transformation over that 4 years in college and how you become a more confident person after 4 years of college.
Yeah, my parents, I think, well, I have the video of it. My mom was that was pretty cool. That's great. Yeah, but
let's move on to give me a defining moment in your a lot of people assume that, hey, listen, this guy's coached 9 state championships and all that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And, you're going to point to one of those. But, I've been surprised. I asked a lot of folks what their defining, some of their defining moments, and they surprised me for professionally. You've been a teacher and an educator and Sunday school teacher and all those types of things. But you've also been a coach. Tell me a defining moment in your professional career.
Defining moment in my professional career, I spent one of my favorite professors in college was a political science professor at North Central, and he was a son of Holocaust survivors and taught a course in the Holocaust. And I took that course, and that course to me was transformative in terms of a mission, in terms of how important it was to learn what causes tragic events like the Holocaust, and what we as present day Americans, human beings, can do to try to ensure that those things don't continue to happen. And that really has driven a lot of what I do professionally. I mean, my second or third year as a teacher, I sponsored an event where we brought in about like 20 plus survivors to North, and divided up the entire population of students so they could hear Holocaust survivors, and have since developed a class on genocide, and how we address it, or sometimes fail to address it. So I think that it probably has been both that class and my experience learning and meeting and getting to know personally survivors of the Holocaust that has driven, again, not just the desire to teach the Holocaust generally, but also a desire to teach government, desire to teach responsible citizenship. And so I think that to me, I mean, even my work now as a union president is, motivated in many ways to, helping to create a more humane, human, I guess, educational system.
That's great. So one of the things that to close off this interview, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again.
Sure.
Because you've got a lot to share. I think a lot of people can learn a lot from making the most out of their life. But one of the things that sometimes I think about is the optimism of folks in our country. And I know that I work with a number of young people at our law firm, and I meet a lot of young people, and I'm absolutely floored by the quality and what I think is the future of the country. Tell me about what you think. Do you have an optimism for the future in the U.S.? I mean, being a history teacher and a government teacher, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh boy, yeah, I vacillate on that. I mean, of course, I have hope. I mean, I would never consider myself a existential pessimist as far as that goes, but at the same time, I also, I read through Facebook posts and those sorts of things, and the level of our discourse and dialogue, I have some real concern about, and I think we don't particularly disagree with ourselves very well. I think, and I think that could cause harm to us going forward. And I think that is one area where I'm a little less optimistic, I guess, is in our ability to say I disagree with you and still be able to love one another, and to work together for positive good. Because right now it seems like when we disagree with one another, there's no possible way that to find common ground. And I think that is an incredibly damaging phenomenon. And I think it's a relatively recent phenomenon, and certainly even seeing it right now with various takes on what happened with the Senate stimulus bill and so on and so forth. But these are not things that that are impossible to overcome. We have to get better at making sure that we can process good information and do it in a way that's productive.
I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I think about is that the way to make a difference in the world is to start locally, and to think less about the macro and more about the micro, and to start with our neighbors, and whether we agree or disagree with them politically, etc. Everybody is a human being, and everybody is in my worldview created by God and is important.
Right.
And I tell you, I'm really happy that my two of my daughters got to the chance to be coached by you and your program, and I think they took lifelong lessons from that. And I think you're doing your part, working locally here at our schools and in our community, and I really appreciate that. And I have hope for the future with respect to when I'm in our community, which is in West Suburban Chicago.
Right.
I think we've got just a great group of people that cares about our neighbors, and that's a really good thing. But I really appreciate you coming on. I know you've got a lot of business ahead of you today, and taking the time to do this. We'll close it with this. I understand that you're giving this interview and you are a bald man.
I am. Yes, that's true. Yes.
And so one of the things that I always got a kick out, if you go to Facebook and you look at some of Dan Iverson, people call him Mr. Iverson. Mr. Iverson's posts, you'll see him every year. He ends up getting shaved down to a bald man for St. Baldrick's Society. Right. Can you tell the listeners what that's all about?
Yeah, it's the St. Baldrick's Foundation is a fantastic foundation that is dedicated to fighting childhood cancers through funding research into various childhood cancers, and it's a great organization. It's gives virtually all the money that you give to it goes straight to funding research into childhood cancers. And North, and I've been up until this year, I've run North's event. This year I just participated. But volunteers sign up, shave their head, and raise money for the foundation. And every year I've allowed my top fundraising class to do a day ahead of time whatever they wanted with my hair, so they could shave it, color it, as long as there was nothing dirty or anything. But so I would have to wear it that day. And a lot of times we had a meet, so I would have to coach with my hair all multicolored and funky shaved and that sort of a thing. But this year obviously was a little different. So it was just the freshmen in track earned the most money this year. So they got to pick what was done to my hair, but my daughter ended up doing it because of course we're all at stay at home right now. So yeah, that happened last week, and now I'm just bald. So
Well, I hope that the hair grows back quickly.
Yes.
And but thank you so much for joining us today. It's a fascinating interview. Every time I talk to you, I'm very interested. And then maybe we'll talk about some of your favorite books next time we talk.
Anytime.
Okay?
Joe, it's great to talk to you. And say hello to the daughters too, Emily and Kate, for sure. I miss having them around.
All right. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the opening statement. If you have any questions or comments about today's episode, you can email me at joseph@shannonlawgroup.com. Please subscribe and review if you enjoyed the show. I'll see you on the next episode.